Welcome back. The Social Development Commission of Milwaukee recognizes that there are many factors that result in poverty, and Dr. George Hinton sat down with me to talk about the many programs and services the SDC offers in our community. Dr. George Hinton is the CEO of the Social Development Commission, also known as SDC. They empower Milwaukee County residents with resources to move beyond poverty. How are you, Dr. Hinton?
I'm good. How are you, Andrea?
I'm glad to have you here. And I think in order to better understand poverty and the factors that contribute to it, it's also important to understand racism and how the two are intertwined. So if you would, first off, kind of give us an idea of how those two unfortunately go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think if you look at poverty, you have to bring in issues of class and issues of race, especially when you talk about racism for people of color in the United States. It's kind of weird because it's really, you can't talk about racism if you don't deal with some of the classism that takes place all around the world, but specifically how it's done in the United States. Because we're a capitalist have a capitalist system, we have a tendency to need a lot of labor, cheap labor, and that tends to create systems that create people who are in poverty. And those people, a lot of times when we look at it from a racist perspective, there's some systemic things that kind of like drive that a lot of people of color sit in that category, that worker category. Sometimes I really get upset when they don't say all people in poverty are working class, but that is true. They're all working. We just have a tendency to call one poverty working class and the other poverty people of color who were.
Very interesting, that aspect. So the discrimination that exists perpetuates discrimination and impoverishes certain groups of people who suffer from unequal access to basic needs and resources. So let's talk about the resources that you provide from the SDC organization to really help change the narrative for people who know all too well what we're talking about.
Well, Andrea, you know, it's been interesting. I came into SDC about 8 years ago, and at first I was like, wow, we do a lot of stuff. Do we need to do all these things? But my healthcare background helped me with that analysis, because no two poverties are the same, because no two people are the same, and no two families are the same. And so because the complexity of how people live in poverty, of why they're in poverty, can be multifaceted. So there's a lot of services needed. We can't do everything for everybody, even though SDC does a lot of programming. We have to partner with many organizations and the government and even private industry to just help one family or one person get out of poverty. So SDC, what we do is we do an integrated service approach. Somebody comes in, they have an issue, we ask them what's going on, and they help us design a strategy. They design their own strategy to move beyond poverty. And then we give them the resources we have and try to find our partners to give others.
Wow. So let's look at a couple of the programs that you have in place. You've got career services, and you've talked about the fact that there are many working people who still aren't able to make the wages that they need in order to get out of poverty. And then when they get sometimes help from government agencies, if they happen to make just a little bit too much money from even hustling, trying to make ends meet, they lose the help that they were getting to get out of poverty. So it's almost like a cycle that is a part of a system that is not working for a lot of people. So with that said, Milwaukee's unemployment rate reached nearly 5% in 2021. So when we look at your career services, exactly what is it that you do under that particular umbrella?
Well, we have some programs designed around industries like construction or food service, but we also help people just understand how to work a computer. You know, we look at this time in our life where there's a lot of telephone use around technology, but that's not knowing how to work on a computer. And so we help people with computer skills, we help people with interviewing skills, we help people source out opportunities that they want to do. See, a lot of times what we try not to do is force people into particular types of jobs, because it's gotta be in you for you
You
to do
gotta
certain.
love what you do to
Right.
be motivated to go and do it.
Right,
I
and,
agree.
and too often we grab people and just throw them at jobs and throw them at training without really understanding what do you want to do, so that you can match it up a little bit better. I mean, we've got artists who want to be artists. I would love us to have some kind of programs to help artists find jobs in the artist industry, in art industries. But that's the way it needs to be, but that's not the way it is. We have a tendency to build programs and then force people into it, and then we really struggle when they don't succeed.
Yeah, it's like going to work just to be able to pay your bills can get a little mundane, and I think that people at least should have an interest in what they're doing. So it's good to hear you say that. You have the Absolute Advantage program and the Chef. So tell us a little about that.
Absolute Advantage program is a pre-apprentice program that gives our community basic construction skill sets. Our goal is to make them attractive to the contractors that are out there, or to be able to go into MATC, or to find a job that just gives them skills that they will be attractive, so that they can put it on their resume. We give them a lot of certifications that they would not have gotten on their own. So my biggest challenge isn't so much getting people trained, it's having the businesses to be ready to accept them. Because that's another problem. You can train people all day if you don't have the demand for the labor, which you would think we do because we talk about it so much, but I still find it way too hard to get people jobs.
Wow. So education services, a lot of times you have people who maybe don't have the education that they need in order to obtain certain jobs. So you're definitely there to help in that regard. The high school graduation rate in Milwaukee was last reported at 69.1%. And am I correct in thinking those numbers have gone up? Or is that still not?
It's kind of normal of what
Okay.
we've seen in the past, I think. May have ticked up, but I think those numbers are not where we want to be as a community. It's really causing a lot of the issues that we see in terms of people's career choices. Now, I dropped out of school, so I can relate to the challenges of not being able to get the type of jobs you want to get if you don't have a high school diploma. I tell young people, it's a baseline need that you have to have your high school diploma. And then you still need to be educated in skills, or start doing some other type of education on top of that. Too often we don't get our kids through school to get a high school diploma. So SDC does have a high school equivalency program, because we have a lot of adults, or even young adults, who come in and say, I need to get my high school equivalency or GED just so I can qualify for a job. And so, you know, we really have to take that serious as a nation. We should not have people not graduate from high school, especially since most of the jobs, almost all of the jobs, require high school.
So for individuals living in poverty, and it's something about that, people living in poverty, that statement, it kind of feels like it puts people in a bubble, or it says something about who they are, and we know that that's not ever a determining factor about people and what they're able to accomplish. So I say that just putting an asterisk beside that, but there's an overwhelming majority that report mental and psychosocial concerns. So you also have programs in place, because we're talking about still really battling through this pandemic, and we know that it has hurt people from every background on every level. So what are some of the things that you're doing to help individuals kind of battle their way through that challenge?
Yeah, we were doing that before the pandemic, and the pandemic has increased the stress levels on families, period. Especially those who lost jobs and haven't recovered from that, or just the cost of living has gone up to the point where people just don't have enough. It's the in and out. You know, if you don't have enough resources to pay for everything you basically need, that creates stress.
Absolutely.
And stress begins the process of mental health issues. And then you have those people who then perpetuate that onto our children. And so we spend a lot of time in the schools working with young people and teachers and classes to try to walk through de-stress relating type strategies. And then we have individual counseling for young people and adults. If we can't handle it, we refer things over to experts that have more skill sets than we do in terms of the mental health realm. But we don't invest enough in this country in mental health. I think we too often look at it as something as a negative when in fact it's a part of life, especially when you get stressed when you get married.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
stress is going to be bad or good, but it does still impact your body and the way you might approach life.
Very true. And as we wrap up, I just really want to get your thought on what really needs to be done when it comes to dealing with the systems that are in place, those statistics that we hear over and over again about the state of Milwaukee and the people who live here. We've got a lot of things that are changing at a slow pace, but in your opinion, what needs to be done looking at the full picture?
Well, the social service industry is built on continuation. It's a self-propelling process. And basically the reason that is the case is because we don't really deal with the problem, we deal with the symptom. We do a lot of transactional interventions. We give people rent money so they don't get evicted. But we never deal with the reason as why are they in a position where they're going to get evicted.
Yeah.
We deal with issues of people who were incarcerated by trying to help them after they get out. We don't deal with why did they get incarcerated. We don't get to the root cause of things. And one of the things SDC is really working hard through our strategic planning is to understand how do we do that better. How do we help our community do that better? SDC can't do it. We have to begin to look at our problems in our country in a deeper way. We tend to react to what we see, not what actually causes the problem.
Wow, that's pretty deep, and I'm just happy that you were able to come by today and help us get some better insight on the things that are happening right here where we live. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Always a pleasure. Dr. George Hinton is the CEO of the Social Development Commission in Milwaukee. For more information on anything we've discussed, you can visit their website at cr-sdc.org. And while you're there, please fill out their community needs assessment where they can get a better understanding of how they can serve you in the community. You can also give them a call at 414-906-2700. When we come back, we'll learn about how one of the oldest community foundations in the world has been rethinking the role of philanthropy in the fight against systemic racism. My conversation with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation is right after this.